what I believe is common sense, I'm learning it's not that common. For far too long, the public has been left out of the room in so many important discussions on community issues. I assumed this was a fact as a private citizen, and now I know this as a publicly elected official. I want to change this, and I want to invite my community into the conversation. And that requires a new space where you can listen in behind the scenes to the discussions that lead to decisions that are impacting our lives. So here we are, to a podcast I'm simply calling Common Sense, where I invite these conversations for the whole world to see. And for this first conversation, I can think of no one better to kick that off with than former County Commissioner Lacey Cruse. Lacey was elected to the Sedgwick County Commission in November of 2018. She quickly made a name for herself, and her presence was felt on the commission, and by the end of her first term, it was unquestionable that she had become one of the most outspoken, controversial figures in all of local politics. She was also my political opponent as I ran for her seat in 2022. Whether you agreed or you disagreed with Lacey, or whether she was wrong or right, she was going to make her opinions heard. So we talk about her time on the commission, we talk about some of the most controversial issues, we talk about our 2022 campaign and how we both experienced it. She shares a bit about what she's doing now. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with former Commissioner Lacey Cruse. Lacey Cruse, thank you for being here. It was funny when I decided I wanted to do this for all the reasons you and I talked about, like inviting people to a space to hear conversations in a real way about people in our community, things happening in our community. I asked around, I said, who do I invite to do this? Like, who should I have first? And threw out some names, and my wife goes, why don't you ask Lacey to do it? And literally it was like,
I knew I liked your wife.
She's great. Yeah. But then the question was, okay, would she want to do this? And a lot of people are curious about, like, there was a point in time we were political opponents, but we've had coffee a few times. You text me, you keep me posted on things that are going on in the community. I share things with you, and I think people, I don't know if they get uneasy about that, but I don't know if they understand that, hey, listen, I don't hate you, and I don't think you hate me, and like, you get the same vibe from people, and if you tell them that, hey, I had coffee with Ryan Baty, is that?
Yeah, I think it's easier for people to digest when they see opponents hating each other, because that's the typical thing, right?
Yeah.
People can understand conflict. I think people nowadays are just so used to that. And when people come together that aren't really supposed to come together, it like sets people off.
That's good. All right, give us an update. What have you been doing? Like, since the county commission, couple years. What have you been up to?
Gosh, has it been a couple of years? Third year, right?
Yes.
Man. So for about a year, I just did nothing. I sold a house. I rented a house. I bought a house. I was in a real transition period of just trying to figure out what the hell to do. When you're doing something every single day, every single night, you're literally never not doing anything. It was nice to just sit back and do nothing. So that's kind of what I did for a really long time. Yeah. And it was nice. The sale of my house, I didn't have to work for a while. And it was nice to just sit back and rest. So that's kind of what I did for a long time. And then, I've just really been focused on my daughters. I just got a message from my daughter today, my oldest daughter, Bailey, she just submitted her resume, and she applied for a couple of art teaching positions. And so it's just really nice to be focused on my daughters and focused on my friends and family. That's really been the gist. I got some exciting things in the pipeline, but, that's...
Well, I think when you're in local government in particular, there are a lot of trade-offs, and there's some sacrifices that I think people don't really fully understand. It's not just about a county commission meeting. I mean, the evening events, the discussions. And what I try to tell people, my life has always been busy, and I think you're probably the same way, always been busy. The difference in that role is every decision is heavy. Like, it's just a heaviness, because every decision impacts someone. Every decision is a battle between what do you do as an organization, but there's a political influence here, and oftentimes they do this. It just feels like everything is is very heavy, and there's an impact, and the impact is felt mostly with your family. I mean, we have 4 kids now. My wife, like we've always been busy, but I'm not home much anymore, and I'd assume that was the same with you.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, it'll be interesting to hear how you feel when who knows how long you'll be in, but when I look at the pictures from when I first got in to now, it's like they were little tiny kids.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I just, really look back and think about how much time that I didn't get with them during some really pivotal moments in their life. And, people expect you. I mean, do you find that people kind of feel like they own you?
Yeah.
That was the sort of sentiment that I got from a lot of people.
I get that.
And it was like, oh man, I'm a single mother of 2 daughters trying to balance all of these things.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult. And looking back, it kind of makes me a little sad that, I sacrificed so much. I mean, I'm proud of the work that I did, but I mean, gosh, just thinking about all the times that I missed from my children, but my friends too, it was like, gosh.
It's a sacrifice. And, part of it for me, there are days I leave the office and I'm like, man, we got something done today. It was productive. There's days I leave the office and I'm like, what in the world? Like, what am I doing? What are we doing? Like, what is happening right now? And I think that's probably a feeling that many people can relate to. I'm incredibly hopeful, but there's days where I wouldn't call it discouraged, but I'm frustrated, particularly at the pace of things.
Oh my God, it's
hard.
It was like, why is it taking so long? And then just to sit through those meetings where everything is so detailed and it's like, okay, I really got the point 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Can you please just cut to the chase?
Yeah.
Like that was difficult.
There are days though, because I did a time in pastoral ministry. There's many days that this feels a lot like ministry too. In this context, as you're serving people, you're serving people, and I get that the context of, man, people feel like they own your time. I completely understand that, and part of the challenge there is I want to serve. Like I have a heart for wanting to serve people, and the biggest challenge for me was I also want to be liked. I want to walk into a room and I want people to like me. I want people to be able to see me as a problem solver, and that is just not a reality in politics.
Well, it's a good thing you're likable, though.
Some days, yeah, some days.
Because, I think a lot of us want to be liked, but others, the way they perceive us just isn't, how we would like for them to perceive us. Yeah. But let me make sure I'm clear, because the whole get to the chase was the meetings. The meetings of county government was like, okay, guys, just the detailed nature in which information is presented to you was ridiculously slow.
And what you're getting at, for me too, I told someone today, I said, I'm a lot of things, but one thing I'm not is patient. I lack patience. And you have, for people that don't know, Sedgwick County government, it's 46 departments. It's upwards of 3,000 employees. You do everything from public safety to public health. There's public works. And you're involved in the community. There's a lot. And every single meeting is a level of detail that you got to dial in at. And it's hard. It's really hard. So I totally get that. And I get when you say it's like, man, the season of rest that you went into, I understand that. There's a principle, there's this concept called Sabbath, right? Where it's a ceasing, it's a resting. And we're wired to have seasons of rest. Sometimes it's weekly, sometimes there's an annual resting. People need vacation and need health. But when you don't have that, it takes a toll. It takes a toll physically. I look at pictures and I've only been there a couple of years, and it's like, oh my God, what happened to my hair? What has happened to me?
God, my hair is so gray now.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh.
But I feel it in my body. I was telling you earlier, I haven't been in the gym in 9 months. I just feel it. There's a heaviness. But tell me about that time. You served in a really contentious time. And as you know, Sedgwick County government, there's years of contention. There's years of stress and a lot of hard decisions. But, you came on in 2019, and then 2020 hit, COVID. Tell me about, what was it like serving in that time? Do you have regrets in that time? Talk to me about what that was like. Trying to understand what it'd be like to be in the seat at that point in time.
Yeah. Well, when I kind of came on the scene, nobody knew who I was, right? I came from being a musician, being in the creative community to now I'm thrust into this world that I didn't really know. I still don't really understand it. I didn't really understand it then. I went in with like this rosy colored glasses that like I could change the world, which I think we need that, but it was just too hot too quick for me. And everybody wanted a little piece of me that I didn't know how to say no to everyone. So I kind of just really burnt myself out on just trying to meet everybody and manage expectations. And I really kind of aligned myself with a couple of people that I thought were my mentors at the time, that I thought maybe were there to help me, but I didn't really, at the end, it didn't really turn out to be so. But the first year was just like, everybody was, I felt like the smartest person in the room because everybody was like, oh, I love that idea. I love this. I love that. And then, COVID hit and it was just really chaos. I mean, the whole world didn't know what to do.
Sure.
And being the Democrat on the commission, it was like, I think even though how it is, you have to have 3 votes to do anything. One vote didn't change anything. I had to have 2 others.
Did that frustrate? I mean, did that frustrate you? Because you're 1 vote, there's 4 Republicans, and they're typically voting for the most part, a block many times. And here you are contending for the things you cared about, whether agree or disagree. I mean, how did that manifest in you? Was that frustration?
Yeah.
Was it tension? Was it?
Well, not only was I the only Democrat, in that sort of sense, but I was the only woman, and I was the only woman that had been there for a very long time. And so that the gender dynamics played into, my age, I think, played into. And so just, it was kind of a good old boys club. I'm not saying it's not now. I'm not saying that too many things have changed.
And you said that frequently. I mean, these were conversations you had. The one thing about Lacey that I tell people this that I appreciate about you, again, whether you agree or you disagree, you always know where Lacey stood. And you said things that many people are like, I can't believe she said that. But you said it, and it's because you meant it and you believed it. Again, whether you agree or disagree, I think that's admirable in many regards to where, again, and I didn't always agree with some, and you and I, we agree on some things. We don't agree on a lot of things, but what I always admired was you knew where she stood. Like you knew where she stood. And I think many of the constituents appreciated that about you.
Well, I didn't really know any better. I've been like this my whole life, right? Like there was no facade that I put on when I went into this role. I was naive. My God, I was naive. I had no clue what I was getting into, but I'm smart and I learn quickly. And for some reason, my brain just has this ability to take large bits of information and really dial it down so that people could understand it. And that's really what I tried to do. And during COVID, it was just like, just the panic, the sort of, nobody knew what was going to happen. And when things started shutting down and masks and vaccines and all that stuff, it was just like I was on the line with physicians nearly daily, talking to people and hearing what was really happening in our hospitals. And for me, it was just like, good God, I have to listen to the people so that if I have a heart attack or somebody dies, and has a medical issue that's not even COVID, they have the capacity to handle that.
Interesting.
But the fact that, it does take 3 to get back to that point, I really took a lot of flack. Like I was the one that shut the county down. Like it was all my fault. Like I was it was like people like to give me leadership, abilities when I'm making decisions, but I don't ever get any sort of like, I don't get any kudos for my leadership. I get kudos for the leadership that I take when people are pissed at my decisions. But it was really difficult. And then just my children staying at home, our children, and I hated that. They needed to be in school, right? I mean, these were not as easy decisions to make. And just the fact that people are like, oh, she wants this power and she's so power hungry. It's like, no, this is just the role that I
you'd rather
fell
not
into.
Be the situation. Yeah, I get it. And I always tried to, when I first got on the county, because I look back, and you can look back and say, well, if I would have done this or I would have done this. And we all do those things. We all look back with hindsight an armchair quarterback. I don't think it's helpful. I think everyone would probably look back at that era and say, if we only knew, I would have done this. And if this was to happen again, we know better not to do this or will do this. And so I haven't passed judgment in that regard, but I definitely see the impact, man. When I first started walking around the 6th floor of Ruffin Building, when I first got there, like it was like people had some PTSD, staff. I mean, literally, because they had gone through the ringer with COVID, and they had gone through the ringer of just a lot of different things. I mean, you saw FBI investigations, you saw, it was just contentious, constant contention and drama. And it's just, it felt like staff they're like walking zombies in many regards. And it was like, okay, everybody hit pause. We need a little hope. We need some energy. Let's everybody calm down a little bit and reset. And I think post-COVID, I think the county has tried to reset itself in a way that is much healthier, but I get it, man. I'm glad that I didn't have to make those decisions in that seat at that time, because I think it was lose-lose for a lot of people.
You know, I think that had COVID not happened, I would have had a lot more energy to, my first campaign was so fiery, but dealing with COVID for 2 years, being new to government, just the pressures of that, handling my home life, my dad who is really sick and ill, and I was dealing with a lot of things. I shared a lot of things with people. I tried to be really open and authentic with the struggles that I had. But
it's just who you are, right? I mean, you're like me. I'm kind of an oversharer. Like I communicate. It's what I do. I want people to know, and you're built that way, right?
Yeah.
For better or worse, and it's probably not a great attribute to have as a politician, as an elected politician.
Well, it's weaponized. It's really weaponized. And, I think people take your vulnerability and they use it against you. And that is really gross. And just the nastiness of it was just really detrimental to my soul and my spirit. And that's why I think it took me so long after just to rest, because, I did have some PTSD. I realized that I'm absolutely neurodivergent. Like I have ADHD like a mofo. Like I just learned a lot about myself that I'm so glad that even though that period of time was ridiculous and I wouldn't go back and do it.
Really?
But I wouldn't change what I did.
It's interesting to hear. Like a lot of people ask like, what have you learned, or do you have any regrets? Or I think we can all go back and say, yeah, I wish I would have done that different, or maybe I would have interpreted that differently, or handled that conversation in a different way. But so you wouldn't go back and change anything. Like you're glad for the season took a lot out of you, admittedly. Like you had to have a year of recovery after this in regards to, man, I need a break. But you wouldn't go back and do it again, huh?
No, you know what? Because every single bit of that, from the time I was born until now, I have learned so much about who I am, how I operate, how other people are. And what I've learned now, really about that time, is how to regulate my nervous system. My nervous system was so out of whack. Like I literally had a nervous breakdown. There were a couple of key things that happened that really, really broke me. And I wasn't able to, I didn't know at the time that that's what was happening because there was just so much going on. But I just didn't know how to react. I was in a functional freeze is what they call it. And I just shut down. And so after that time, my body was just like, you have to chill. Yeah. You have to chill, you have to sleep, you have to rest, you have to eat good food. You just have to chill.
You needed a reset.
Yeah.
There was a moment that I've told a few people about this story because I wanted them to understand you a little better, and I wanted them to understand my relationship with you. But after the 2022 campaign and after the election night, I had texted you the day of the election and said, hey, no matter what happens, hey, let's connect. Like, let's go get a cup of coffee and talk. I want to learn about things you're working on. And you were very gracious, replied back and said, yep, we'll do it. And then for a couple weeks afterwards, I was like, gosh, do I reach out to her? Like, what do I do? How do we navigate this situation? And then you text me and said, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee. And we met down at the Our Coffee House, down in Riverside. And when you walked in, you looked at me and you became
I started bawling?
Yes.
Because I'm a crier?
Yeah, but what that told me was just exactly what you just described, is this culmination of emotions and feelings and experiences kind of just broke. And we met for about 90 minutes, and for about 60 minutes of the 90 minutes, I mean, I could feel it. I can sense it in you. I mean, you were very emotional. And then you walked me through things you were working on. We had a great meeting. And I posted on Facebook afterwards, I just had one of the best meetings I've had in this entire experience with you. Man, I got all kinds of like, oh, don't give credit, don't do. It's like, no, literally.
Yeah.
Like, but it helped me understand you, because we had just spent a year basically competing against each other. And then we're able to get in the room, and I saw you in a moment of vulnerability, in a moment of strength, in a moment of conviction. And I was like, yeah, man, like, she's not my enemy. She's not my opponent. Like, it moved me to a level of trying to understand, a level of compassion that I think has kind of helped me in our relationship since then. It's like, yeah, she went through a lot, and she's vulnerable about it. So I appreciated that meeting.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I think that that's the beauty of life and people, and how we're all different and we all bring different things to the table. And that's the one thing that I really couldn't understand about how people, like, I do operate in a different way. My brain works in a different way. Only 20% of people in the world are neurodivergent. If you think about how the world is designed, it's designed for neurotypical people. Now, I don't want to get too weird with the neurology of all of this, but I think it's important for people to really recognize that our differences are the beautiful thing about each of us. Like, I can't do the things you do, and you can't do the things I do, but together we can really do a lot. And I just, during that time, I think that was one of the really hard things that I couldn't understand. It was like, I don't care what my colleagues are doing. Like, do your thing. Don't worry about what I'm doing. But when we come to like, listen to my point, right? I'm going to listen to your point. Will you listen? Will you listen to mine?
Sure.
And I just, it felt like, because I just operate in a different way. I mean, I just can't help it. Like,
So you are.
I think emotions are okay to share. And because this whole world has, and for society and forever, if you show emotions, you're weak. Well, I don't believe that. And I think that that is a sign of strength. I think connection with people, you have to be vulnerable. I just didn't know when to sort of tamper it down a little bit.
Sure.
But that's because I couldn't. And like my last day on the commission, I could not quit crying. And it's because my body was so dysregulated. If you want to get into the science of it, like, and I've been studying this for the past 2.5 years now, or however long it's been. Like, my body was so dysregulated that crying was the way that it was expressing all of these pent up things.
Sure.
And, now it's like, I think that's why I gravitate towards music, because when I don't play my guitar, I know when I don't play music, because I feel like crap when I play it. And when I express myself through music, whether it be dancing or moving or playing my guitar or kind of haggardly playing the piano, it helps me.
Yeah.
And
I get it. I totally get that. Inputs impact outputs. For me, it's different because I have zero musical ability. We were talking before, is that if I had to choose between if I could sing or dance, I think I'd choose dancing, but I have no giftings in that whatsoever. And you're right, you have strengths, different people have strengths, and it all brings value to the table. That diversity brings value to the table. And it's powerful when it's used in a way to move initiatives forward, to listen to everybody's experiences. And one of the things that I feel, what you just said about, you can tell when you're not playing music because it impacts you. For me, it's, from a person from a faith background, like, if I don't get in the scriptures and if I'm not in a mode of prayer and a rhythm, like, one day I get it. A couple days, like, I start feeling different. I start sensing tension, stress, anger. I just feel different. If I go 3 or 4 or 5 days, like, my wife begins to notice, hey man, you need to, like, what's going on? The point in all that is we're all built different, and we all have to do things that help edify us, help stabilize us, but help us to grow and mature. And so I get it. I get where you're at. I appreciate that. We are built so different. It's so wild. We're built so different, but I have such an appreciation for who you are and how you're wired and how that manifests to the world. So,
well, I appreciate you just like doing this. I mean, because the amount of crap that you're probably going to take from sitting across the table from me, I think it shows a real leader who is willing to take the heat from, You know, I mean, I have felt a lot of the heat from this community. I mean, there are people, when they really don't like you, they really don't like you.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to show it. And I just don't get that. I really don't get how people can be mean-spirited. And I think that was such a struggle for me as, you know, a commissioner who's really trying to be the voice for the voiceless and really stand up there and say the hard things, like say the things that people don't really want to hear but need to be said because everybody in the room is thinking it. It's just nobody has the guts to say it.
Sure.
You know, it's like I was always the kid in the classroom. Sorry, I was always the kid in the classroom who had the question, who asked the question, and then people were like, "Oh my God, thanks for asking that," because I had the same question.
Yeah, sure. And it's hard in politics because you have to have some sort of political capital in order to get the 3 votes and to do these things. And I get it. Let's talk about that 22 campaign if you're cool with it.
Sure.
I want to tell you a story about some things, because we ran during a really unique time in this state. Our campaigns in 2022 was in sync with the Value Them Both campaign. And I remember when this thing started, this was in the spring and the summer, I thought to myself, this is really going to benefit me quite a bit because you're going to have a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives who are going to be motivated to come out and they're going to vote, and this is going to be a benefit to me. Until you kind of became the de facto local leader of the vote no. And I remember seeing you do this and thinking, oh my gosh, like she's motivating a base and motivating, and I'll tell you from a political standpoint, I was getting advice like, well, you need to do the opposite. You know, I was like, no, this is not, I'm not getting into this conversation because this isn't a county conversation. This isn't a Sedgwick County government conversation. But all the while you were out there and I think I remember ABC News came in and interviewed you.
Yeah.
And politically, it was pretty wild to watch all this play out. Like, were you sensing the same thing politically or like?
Okay, so I am such a strong women's advocate that is what drove me. And being the mother of 2 daughters, knowing a ton of women who have had to deal with, like the cause was what it was for me. I mean, I had a miscarriage when I was 13 weeks along, a long time ago, and I had to have a medical abortion, which is a DNC, right? I mean, people just don't understand the intricacies, and it was really important for people to understand how the voting worked and how the language was really designed to maybe not be so honest, and that it was really about just protecting a woman's right.
Yeah, interesting. There was a political piece of that. Like, how do you position yourself politically, and you were leading and you're out in front on that side. And everyone knows, you know this too, that I'm a very pro-life person.
Sure.
I'm so pro-life, I don't kill bugs, right? I mean, I literally, drives my wife crazy. I catch and release, like I don't hunt, I have nothing against hunting. I'm just very pro-life. I'm against the death penalty, which makes a lot of people on my side of the aisle very frustrated with me. But I'll tell you kind of this experience the last really decade, and a lot of us through ministry, is the way we talk about that issue in particular is not helpful. And I think I understand why so many people are fired up and why it's stagnated so many conversations. For me, and many people on my side, we talk about the defense of life, that this is something, and why wouldn't we be fired up about this? Why wouldn't we be active? And on the other side of the discussion, just exactly what you're getting at, is this is an issue of liberty. This is an issue of women's rights.
But it's also an issue of life.
Correct, but these are issues that are many times, the people that are adamantly pro-life are not going to yield, and people that are adamantly liberty, this is an issue of rights and women's rights and things, they're not going to yield. I get it, and this does this, and what happens is we never progress in the conversation or the relationship. And I see this, and what really moved the needle for me was in ministry, having to counsel people that had been, one individual that had been raped, another individual that had an unexpected pregnancy, and the fear, she was lonely. So I'm not, that didn't move where I stand on the position, but it removed the callousness at the other side, that there's a way to have a conversation to where we can actually move forward in this and talk about things and why these principles matter. So it was just interesting because there was a political piece of this, but then there was a really practical piece of it. And the end result of it is we didn't have a conversation in a way that was very productive in our communities and across the state to really say, hey, what are we really arguing about? And how do we come together as a community and advance causes of people? And it's just an interesting discussion when we talk about that issue, the issue of abortion rights and such. this is something that this community and this state has always played with, and we saw this play out while we were running a campaign.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we could just go back to the actual nuts and bolts of if you're campaigning, it probably hurt me to be so adamant.
Do you think so?
Well, hold on, just because it probably hurt me because the only thing that I talked about when I knocked doors for that campaign or when I was out campaigning was vote no. It wasn't Lacey Cruse for county commission. It wasn't here's what I'm going to do. You should vote for me. I didn't have a primary opponent. Yeah. So I didn't talk to anybody about me. The only thing that I talked to when I knocked doors, and that's the only time I knocked doors because after that was when my nervous system broke and I couldn't do anything. That's the only thing that I talked about. So while you were out there campaigning Ryan Baty, I was like vote no, vote no. Mm-hmm. So really it helped the cause, which was the only thing that was important to me at the time. And I mean,
is there ever progress in this to where both sides could say, hey, we can make progress. We can move forward in this. Neither side is going to yield because it's a principle and a moral issue for both sides. And mm-hmm. I understand that now in a way I don't think I did 15 years ago. But is there ever a conversation in this state? Does this issue ever come to a point to where we say we have agreement in this area? Do you think that? I mean, you've been so deep into this issue and so ingrained in this movement.
Here's how I think we have to have small conversations that are, private conversations with people who are trusted. They trust each other, right? We had to have Republican women who voted no on this. They did. 1 out of 4. They did, right? So we need those women to have those conversations with the people that love them. I don't know how to do it, honestly, but I think it's really, you have to be open to understanding the whole conversation because I think there's just so much misinformation around it as a whole. Mm-hmm. I mean, listen, if you don't want to have an abortion, don't have an abortion if you don't believe in it. But our whole right to freedom here is we're not going to infringe on other people, right? So you can believe what you want to believe, and I'm glad that you believe that, and I will respect that. But don't infringe what you believe on me.
And that was what I think became crystal clear to me was the principles that both sides were fighting for. One side was voting for exactly what you just described as this is about rights. This is about you not infringing. This is about not having government overreach. And the other side is saying, but we're defending life. Like this is, mm-hmm. My point in all of this is we're certainly not going to solve this issue and we're certainly not mm-hmm. going to move the community forward in the way we're having this discussion. My point in all of it is it's okay sometimes to say, okay, I can have this conversation in a way that has an understanding that your opinion and my opinion, they may be different for different reasons. And we can have this conversation in a civil way to where we can also lead ourselves in this community in a way that would move us forward. It's been so hard watching the issues that divide us. And that is one issue. And like I said, I don't think there's ever going to be, probably in my lifetime, movement to where we come together and say, we're all going to agree that this is the correct approach on abortion policy. But that's not the only policy that we see so much division on. How right now we're seeing things about, obviously, what's coming down from the federal government and the division. I mean, you voted for Trump, I'm sure. So
I mean, totally.
Yeah, totally. But we see things
I did not.
We see things in regards to DEI. We see things in regards. My point is that how do we find ourselves? Now, here we are. We ran a political campaign against each other. And we can sit at the table and have a conversation, a civil conversation, knowing that your opinion and my opinion likely are not the same, but we can talk about this in a way that is productive.
I think, Ryan,
how do we do that?
Well, from what I know about you, we have values that align with kindness, compassion, and empathy. I mean, I don't know a lot about you, but from how you have treated me, even in our campaign, you were always kind and courteous, and I think people have to check their egos at the door. They have to really figure out how they want to show up in these spaces and what kind of progress they want to make, right? I mean, do you want to be divisive or do you want to be collaborative? And sometimes you have to push those. I mean, Danielle Johnson said to me once, you can't have Malcolm without
Malcolm and
you
Martin.
you can't have one without the other, right? And I think it's important to understand what role you play, what your strengths are, but then what your values are. And one thing I was disappointed in myself during my time on the commission, and this conversation makes me think of this, is it was really disheartening, just the amount of misogyny and sexism that I faced. And it got to me. It really got to me. And it got to me to the point where I let my just sheer anger show a few times, right? Like, just really show. And I just did, again, it goes back to regulating my nervous system. And I say that so much because I think what's happening right now in the media and in our federal government and anywhere that is designed to really enrage people, it's like, let's figure out how to regulate ourselves so much that we're not off kilter, that we don't make bad decisions, that we can figure out how to move forward without hate and rage and all of these things. That really is what's happening. It's what's designed to keep it's designed to keep us fighting.
It's good, Lacey. Yeah, there was a point. You're spot on. And remember, the media sources we get, these 24/7 media sources, are
breaking news.
Yeah, but that's on ratings, right? So they're going to break ratings and break news frequently to drive their ratings. And what sells is contention. What sells is drama. What sells, and we're just ingesting that all day long. There was a point in the campaign that I decided not to take campaign advice. It was probably good advice, and I had a few people from my campaign basically walk on it. And they wanted me to get aggressive. They wanted me to go negative, and they wanted me to, and it was hard for me because I wanted to win. You compete to win, right? I believed in a vision, and I wanted to win a campaign. And the advice I got was actually from my wife, and she said, "You need to be yourself. And if you have to change who you are to win a campaign, do you really want the job?" And when I said that,
I need to go to coffee with your wife.
She's
sometime.
great. She's great. She's brilliant, and she was right on that issue. And that's the point. Is so many people in politics, and I know you saw this, is they lead with their political identity instead of their identity. For me, particularly as a Christian, it's like, no, I want to sow love and joy and peace. I want to sow kindness and gentleness. This is my identity. My identity as a conservative or as a Republican, that's down the totem pole in regards to who I am as a follower of Christ. And we forget this sometimes. And both sides of the aisle do it for different reasons. We forget it. I wasn't going to change who I was in order to win a campaign. I was going to stay true to who I am. And I think in maybe in a different way, you were kind of the same. It's like, this is who I am. And it came down to, this is my ideas. This is who I am. If it's not good enough for the constituents, then that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm okay with that. Like this, I'm not going to change who I am to win an election. And in a different way, you were the same.
I think it worked out exactly how it was supposed to work out. I mean, I don't think that I could have served another term, quite frankly.
Like
physically, emotionally, spiritually, I don't think I had it in me because nobody likes to lose, right? I mean, I'm super competitive. Like, I don't even let my niece win at stuff, and she's 9. But yeah, I just don't think I could have done it. And my heart really wasn't in it, in the sense that the 2 years of COVID, and then the third year is when, the fourth year was when things just switched. It was like people who were kind to me and people who were like, well, I think they were fake. People who were fake to my face just completely switched. It was like you just flipped a light switch. And
why? What was it? Is it because you were no longer, was it political?
It was a campaign year, and they were just sure that I was going to be beat. And that's okay. But it was crazy that how people just switched. And
it hurts.
Yeah, it was like the people you think really are in your corner are not in your corner. And I don't operate like that. I mean, like you said earlier, you literally know what I'm thinking. Like I don't sugarcoat stuff, which is could be to my detriment, and it's all. I mean,
In
whatever,
politics,
right?
I mean, in local government, certain. I mean,
I just couldn't do it, right? It just wasn't who I am. Like, and that was very difficult. Gosh, I don't even know where I'm going. I got lost on my tangent.
No, I get it. I get it. But again, in the end, we have to be true to ourselves, and that's what matters. And it's interesting, Lacey. Here I am. I'm an old school conservative. Like the new conservatism. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what that is. I'm an old school conservative. I come from a libertarian wing in the Republican Party. I'm a conservative Republican. I'm fairly progressive Democrat.
I am actually an independent.
Are you now? Mm-hmm. You got that mad you left the party, huh?
I just hate the two-party system.
Okay, is that a new revelation for you? Like, let me ask this question. Did that come after your local government political experience?
Yes.
You're like, hey, this isn't working, I'm out?
Well, I didn't really feel like I fit into the party. And I didn't really feel like, I didn't want to, I just didn't feel like I fit. I've never really felt like I fit anywhere. Maybe that's okay. That's a whole nother podcast.
We'll do another show.
That's another podcast. But, when I was 18, my mom and I didn't get along. She was a staunch Republican, very conservative Republican. And we didn't really talk politics in my house, but I think I probably asked her, what is your party affiliation? When I went to register, and she was a Republican, so I registered as Democrat. Now, yes, I do have very progressive yes. liberal. That's who I am as a person. But just the two-party system I just don't like it. I hate how it sows division. I hate how it puts labels. I just think it just really divides us in a way that is silly, that is not productive in any way, shape, or form. And it was a matter of, I had finally had control over my life. I had privacy back. It was like, I can change my party, I don't have to do this anymore.
Sure.
It's not that I don't believe in what Democrats believe in. It's not that I think most of us fall somewhere in the middle. Like, I really feel like I really am more moderate than people push me to the left, which that's, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, people just put so many labels on me that it was just a way for me to kind of control that, like a defiant way of, I'm tired of these parties.
And here we are, like, we can sit down and we come from different worldviews politically, and we can sit down and have conversations about these things in a way. And I think that's the message is like, listen, you and when you think about, like, politically, Lacey Cruse, Ryan Baty, it's like, but here we are. Mm-hmm. Like, we're sitting here having conversations, civil conversations in a way that are productive. And they're symbolic of what could be in our community. So, well, I get it. I understand the heaviness. I understand the weight. I understand the healing season. I'm glad to see that this is where you're at now. I think it's all. You think you'll ever run again? You cared about issues?
Absolutely not.
Like, really?
No, my focus now
because there's buzz that, like, well, maybe Lacey wants to come back and run for city council or run from another seat. Like, this isn't where your head's at ever, you don't think?
No. I am a creative. I'm a musician. I can do things from outside of it. I think I was meant to be in it for the time that I was there. COVID happened. I was there. I did what I did. I served my community. I really made a point to make sure that mental health and behavioral health and addiction services, and I just really made that as loud as possible. That's really what I wanted to do. And now I'm really focused on expressive arts and healing nervous systems and helping people really realize who they are and being okay with authenticity. And that's what I'm writing songs and performing, and that's what I want to do.
It makes you happy.
It's not that I'm stepping out of activism or being involved in the community or being involved in things that I believe in, but I'm just doing it from a different way.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. I want to talk just a couple more minutes. One of the issues that you and I really have come to some agreement on is the need for more services, and you had mentioned particularly in the substance use, and there's progress being made there, but also in the homeless community. This was something, the homeless population and those that are unhoused in our district, District 4, this was something that was a prevalent issue and a growing issue. You've been watching a little bit of what's going on in the community, particularly in this ecosystem of homelessness. Like, what do you think? How's the community doing now? And you obviously the MAC, and you and I talked a little bit about the MAC and what we're trying to accomplish at the MAC. Like, what do you think? Like, grade it? Are we doing good? Is there progress still needing to be made? I'm curious of your insight.
Quite frankly, I really haven't been paying that much of attention. I think that I really, I am so focused on my education right now that I really haven't been paying attention. I will say this: if we can focus on housing, if we can focus on getting people the root cause of their problem, whether it be addiction, whether it be mental illness, I think there's a real misconception around that homeless people are addicted or mentally ill, and that's not
100%
true.
agree with you.
It's lack of affordable housing. So if we could work with developers who understand that, low-income housing isn't a moneymaker, it's really not, and to understand you got to have a heart for this kind of thing. We have to get people off the streets. And from what I have heard, and I think the MAC
conceptually is.
I think it's wonderful that it has gotten to this point. I'm very thankful that both sides of the street, City Hall and County, I'm really thankful that you guys are working towards that, and I hope that it only continues to grow because, I sold my house on Topeka, which was, very, very prevalent in the mix every single day, seeing people suffering really. And then what was it last week? -8 degrees. It's just really important that we care. The cost of the jail, which is where people go, what is it? When I was
$75 a day.
Yeah. It was like $43 million a year or something. And just the criminalization that happens with mental illness and homelessness has got to stop because it costs taxpayers way more money to criminalize it than it does to just create community-based services, which is what the MAC is. I'm so excited about it.
I appreciate you saying that. And what I do know and where we have agreement is we're too good of a community to allow people having full public crisis right in front of our eyes. We're too good of a community. And we have solutions. We have opportunities. And the cost. So we'll only get so far. We can talk about compassion. And I think you and I both come to this from a compassion standpoint. It's like, hey, these are people. Like, we can do better here. But there's also an economic issue here. The emergency winter shelter, EMS in the first 60 days of the emergency winter shelter went over there over 400 times at the cost of $250 to close to $515 per trip.
Yep.
So there's a compassion element. We're too good in this community to let this happen, but let vulnerable neighbors experience this. There's also an economic case to be made. Like, hey, if we invest here, we can change this painful trajectory and put us in a better position, not just as a community with healthier families, but we can do this also economically. So. Yeah, we've had a lot of alignment in that, and I was curious of what your take was because I know there's been a lot of progress. And you were in the room in a lot of those meetings with Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition and some of these plans out of the gate. So it's good to hear that that you're staying, and for the most part, that you still very much care about that issue and you're still advocating for people.
Yeah, for sure. That's never going to be anything I'm ever going to stop. My dad almost lost his house. Yeah. The poor guy, may he rest in peace. Yeah. He just, that's it. It's just too close to home for me to not pay attention to it. Growing up with a mentally ill father who was homeless at one point, was about to be homeless at the end of his days. These people are our neighbors. Yeah. And I'm so thankful that you have taken an interest in this, for whatever reason. And I'm just glad, even with the mural project in the jail, I'm so thankful that I hope we can do more of that. I just really appreciate, and I think that you're the best person for the job. I'm just glad that, it seems like you have more, you're kind of built for it, which I'm not.
Oh boy. Which you're not?
I am not built for it, which is why I'm not there. Well, because we both know, let me just say this, we both know, had I had the same fire in my first campaign that I had in my second campaign, I would have beat you.
You said this.
I so would have beat you.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you that credit. Listen, I appreciate you. We come from different worldviews. We were political opponents. I thoroughly enjoy talking to you every time we get a chance. You reach out to me when you have questions, when you have suggestions. Please continue to do that.
Likewise.
It's fun to catch up with you. It's fun to listen to your take. It's fun to reminisce a little bit, and we can do it from a healthy place now. Yeah. This is not a place of political enemies. This is a place of, listen, we're friends. We live in the same district. We care about things the same way in regards to people and vulnerable people. So I appreciate you coming on and chatting and visiting through these things. I wish you the best of luck.
Same.
We'll stay in touch.
Yeah.
You're doing good. I'm happy for you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.